How? Hello, and welcome to the Grand Solar Minimum. Yes, it's the 10th of November. I've got my gloves, got my hat, and everything. It's very, very cold. The Grand Solar Minimum. Yes, if you've never heard of it, well, back in 1971, a group of meteorologists, not that I can say that word, I'm sorry about that, I do apologise, published a paper on the Grand Solar Minimum. Apparently, they worked out that the sun had been heating up for over 300 years, and that the sun, because the sun goes in cycles, it's not a constant. It's not like the sun isn't constant all the time, exactly the same. The sun actually runs in cycles, so it gets hotter and it gets cooler. And for the past 300 years, it's been cooling, it's been heating up, warming up, as from the last place, what was called the mini ice age in Britain. We called it the mini ice age in Britain, where the Thames froze over and they had ice fairs on the Thames. Now, if you think about the Thames freezing over, that's sort of like brackish water, so it would be -3 or 4 before it starts to freeze. So it must have been around about -15 degrees, for it to freeze that much that you could have a fair on top of the water. So Britain actually at that time was more like, the weather was more like deepest Siberia than it was thing, and there's a lot of they lost quite a bit of the population during the worst periods of that, and there was loss of crops, there was loss of everything. It was a pretty harsh time, a very harsh time, and that had been going, that thing. And then we came out of that, and it warmed up, and it warmed up, and it carried on warming up, and it looks like it carried on warming up until virtually to the end of the 20th century, where it sort of plateaued off, and as these meteorologists, I can't avoid saying that word, meteorologists predicted that we would be going into a grand solar minimum. And when they published this paper in 1971, the papers, the newspapers got hold of this and said, shock, the ice age cometh. They sort of sensationalized this and said that they were going we're facing an ice age and the doom and destruction and everything, how they do that sort of thing, because they can't just report the news in a sensible way. They have to sensationalize everything, otherwise they don't think they're going to sell any papers. The more they sensationalize it, the more papers they sell. Anyway, what they predicted was that the sun was going to go into another grand solar minimum, and bish bash bosh. And then after that, because it was still warming up, we got into this thing that the Tory party thing, the global warming. Yeah, and the globe had been warming for the past 300 years. Before the Industrial Revolution, before anything like that, they've been slowly warming up, nice and thing. Trouble is, when it goes into a grand solar minimum, it doesn't sort of go down like that. It tends to go bop. So it's like a sawtooth. If you take sort of mean temperatures over the thing, you can look back over history and actually see it go, ooh, nice and dumph. Nice and dumph, like that. It's like a sawtooth, and when it drops off its thing. Now, the sun, for the past 3 years, has been very little activity in the sunspots, and this is what defines a grand solar minimum. Now, how long it's going to last and how long it isn't going to last, I do not know. But I think it's rather ironic that we have poor Greta Thunberg going, how dare you, when really, everybody's kicking off about this man-made climate change, and meanwhile the sun and the planet and everything like that is just getting on with what it does naturally, and we're going into a cooling cycle. So, watch this space. Global warming and man-made climate change is going to be a thing of the past in the next couple of years. This is my prediction anyway. because people are going to realise that everything is cooling down. Now, a friend of mine in Australia actually contacted me this morning and said, like, it's still bloody winter down there. They said they've had the harshest winter they've ever known. They've seen snow for the first time ever, and he said it's still bloody winter down there. And our winter's just starting here. Well, we're still in late autumn, and it is winter now. The weather here is winter. So keep your eyes peeled. If we have a really, really harsh winter, I mean, if it does go into ground solar minimum, I mean, I think a lot of the politics that have been going on now, and this real hot bit of politics and everything like that, is going to be inconsequential. It's going to be completely inconsequential, because we'll be actually thinking more about survival than sort of, European Union, la-di-da, blah, 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 the great replacement. I'll tell you what, people are going to be going in the other direction, because you're going to have to head south if we do enter into a because it's going to get blinking cold. Very cold. I mean, summers are going to be pretty crap, and winters are going to be very, very harsh. How long this will last? It could last for 100 years. It could last for 50 years. It could last for 30 years. I do not know, and I don't think anybody else knows. But all they know is we're entering into a period called the Grand Solar Minimum. Look it up. Check it. Global warming is a complete hoax. Okay? It's a Grand Solar Minimum. And prepare. Buy a nice pullover. Take care.